Hello to everybody. Hope you're all doing very well today. Welcome to our team management webinar. I'm Rick from the TaxDome team, and as always, I will walk you through today's topics. Now, as the title of the webinar implies, we will be talking about how to set up and manage your team in TaxDome. The information is going to be relevant to both small and large firms. So don't worry about whether or not this is going to be useful to you, because it surely will be. Okay, so I think we can get started here now. So let's take a look at what we'll talk about today. First, we'll go over how to add your team members, and then we'll talk about the access rights that you can give them. Once we're done with that, we'll talk about how to handle client assignments and the difference between being assigned and following an account. We'll then talk about task assignment, and following that, we'll also touch on automating that process for both accounts and tasks. Next, we'll see how to communicate with your team and how to keep them in the loop regarding your clients. Then we'll focus on how you'll manage your team's load before we wrap it all up with some common practices and tips. As always, looks like it's going to be a very productive session, so let us jump right into things. I'll return to the slides in a minute, but first, let me show you how to add your team. If you have employees, you're already aware of the many ways they help you, so I don't think I need to explain why you should add them in your portal. Instead, we'll immediately focus on how to do it. You'll want to go into your settings page in your portal and then head to the Teams and Plans tab. This is the place where you'll manage all your team member details. You'll have a list of them and a button up here to add new ones. And as a quick note, if you're still on your free trial of TaxDome, you can add as many users as you want to test everything out properly. Once you subscribe, you can still keep adding just as many users, but you will need to pay for their licenses. Now, to add one, just click on the Add Member button right here, and a new menu will appear. You're going to see a bunch of options here, but let's take it one step at a time. It's actually quite straightforward here. At the top, you'll want to enter the basic details of the team member, meaning their names and their email address. Now, this is necessary, so an activation email can be sent to them. Right underneath that, you'll see a field where you can choose what role that team member will have, and then right below that, you'll see all the different access rights. Now, these access rights can be customized for each one of your team members individually. This means that you can control precisely what everybody has access to, so there won't be any cases where maybe a receptionist is making some edits to your website or changing the service rates in your time entries. Now, there's a pretty big list of different rights here, but we don't need to go through them one by one since they're pretty self-explanatory. Enabling the Manage Payments option will let the team member create new payments. The View All Accounts toggle will make your full clients list visible to this employee. Assigning teammates lets them assign clients to others, or in other words, give account access to other team members. So as you can see, you don't need to do much learning here before you can add your team. Just in case you aren't sure about some of them, you can just click on this question mark icon right above the list. It will open up our help article that explains exactly what each toggle is for. All right, let's take a step back for a moment and talk about the team member role. I mentioned that you can select it here, but I didn't explain what the actual difference is. The employee role is the default option. This means that you'll select all the rights for them here, and they won't have access to anything beyond that. Now, on the other hand, the admin role gives them access to everything you can select for employees and more. It gives the admin all the rights that the firm owner has, except for the ability to change the roles of other employees, add or delete admins, handle the subscriptions and payment methods, as well as connect QuickBooks online. So what you do with the role and access rights completely depends on what that team member is going to need to do. For example, if you're adding a tax preparer, you might want to give them the ability to manage invoices, manage documents, manage time entries, and some other rights, while not giving them access to all accounts and contacts or the ability to manage your pipelines. You don't necessarily need to pick the ones I mentioned if those don't make sense for your processes. So, which options you'll enable for your team really depends on your unique case. But now, while I'm still here, I'll just quickly enter all the details and enable some rights right here for this example team member, and then I'll invite them right now. They'll get the invitation via email. And once they activate their account, they can immediately start using it. Now, I already activated another one of these team members to help you compare what they can see and what the firm owner sees. The Insights page looks mostly the same, but if I open the Plus New menu, you'll notice that some of these elements are grayed out because they don't have the needed access rights to them. Now, in the Clients page, they'll also only be able to see a couple of clients since they weren't given access to everyone. And if I go into the settings, you'll see that they don't even have all the tabs that the firm owner would use. Most notably, the firm settings, firm balance, but also other tabs like the Site and Templates tab are missing because I didn't give them access to manage those. Now, I'll just switch over to the firm owner perspective again, and you'll notice that I have more tabs available here. Okay, now that you got a feel for adding team members and their rights, let's start talking about how you will manage your team. Now, we'll start by focusing on assigning clients to your team. Let's go right now to the Clients page. There are a couple of ways to assign team members to clients, and I'll show them to you, but I will point out which method you'll most likely use more often. Let's start with the most basic one. If you open an account and then go to their Info tab, you will see all of their details. However, if you click on the Edit button here, you will be able to add your team members to the assignee field. Now, as a quick note, you can have as many team members assigned to a client as you need, and you can change who's assigned at any time. All right, now on to the second method, which is the one that we see most companies commonly using, because it lets you assign and reassign clients in bulk. Now, I'll go back to the Clients page one more time, and then I'll just start selecting some of my clients. Now you'll notice the bulk actions will appear above the list, and here I can just click on the Manage Team button. It will redirect you to a new page where you'll see a list of your team members, and on the right of them, you'll select what you want to happen for each of them. As an example here, I want everyone I just selected to be assigned to the team manager. So I'll click here and a small drop-down menu will appear where I then have to choose exactly what happens, meaning whether I want them to be assigned to the clients, unassign them, or do nothing. Now with these options, you can reassign clients quite easily in just a few moments. Let's say you've got a new team member who's going to be handling all the clients that someone else was handling up until now. You would just have to go into this menu, choose Remove for all the old team member, and Assign to all for the new team member. A minute later, boom, everything's taken care of. Now, there's also a way to automate the assignment process in two different ways, but I'll show you just one of those for now, and then the other one in a few minutes once we talk about something else that's going to be pretty important. Let's head to the Settings page and then the Firm Settings tab. I'll scroll down a bit and I'll find this section right here with the default account access title. Whoever you put in here will automatically be assigned to any newly created accounts. So if you have the option enabled for prospects or clients to be able to sign up on their own, then the team member you select right here is going to automatically be assigned to them. However, just to confirm, in case you were just about to ask, for any accounts that you're adding yourself, you can still choose who you want to assign to them. So you don't need to worry about having to unassign the team member in cases where you didn't want them to be given account access. As for how you'll use this default account access function, it's once again up to you, but here's an example. Maybe you could have your salesperson set as the default assignee, and that way, whenever someone new signs up for your portal, they'll know and they'll immediately be able to get in touch with them to hopefully make you some more money. Alrighty, before we move on to talk about tasks, let's take a moment to clear up the difference between being assigned to a client and following them. If we go back to the client's page, you'll see the follow column with the eye icons in it. So that's the easiest way to tell if you are following somebody or not. But what does that mean though? Well, being assigned to a client means being given access to their information and the ability to interact with them, while following is only related to receiving notifications regarding everything that's going on with them. So let's take a look at it this way. If you don't have access to all accounts, someone will need to assign you to a client. When they do that, you'll get access to them, but you'll also automatically follow the client. So you'll have access to their information and you'll be notified regarding everything that they do. Now, if someone were to unassign the client from you at a later point, you would also unfollow them again automatically. So at this point, you may be wondering, what's the point of the following function if it just gets added when you're assigned and removed when you're unassigned? Now, I'll try to clear that up right now here. If you don't want to receive notifications about a specific client, then you can unfollow them manually. You would still remain assigned to them, but you wouldn't receive any further notifications. Alternatively, if you've been given access to all client accounts, you would be able to follow accounts without needing to be assigned to them if you want to be notified about whatever their actions happen to be. So this is a great way to stay in the loop. Now let me switch back to the portal so I can show you how to do this. Once again, this can be done one by one by opening an account, then clicking on the eye icon in the top right, and then enabling the follow toggle here. Or you can do it in bulk from your client's page by once again selecting the clients and choosing the follow or unfollow option in the menu, or more specifically, under More Actions. Now that you know the difference, how does this help you with your team management? Well, the answer is by knowing that once you assign a team member to a client, they will be notified about them, and once you unassign them, all of the notifications will stop. This will be very important later in this webinar once we talk more about automating assignments. Now, the other reason why I wanted to talk about this is because you can assign and unassign team members, but the follow option is something that you cannot change separately for them. They control that on their own. Okay, I know I just covered a lot here, and I appreciate that. Before we continue talking about the other type of automatic account assignments, let's focus on something else for a bit. We'll want to talk about assigning tasks to your team. Now, this will work very similar to assigning accounts, but you'll be doing it from a different page. Open your tasks list from the workflow page, and in the table there, you will see a column for the assignee. If you click on it, you will be able to select or change the assignee instantly. You can also select multiple tasks and then edit them in bulk, but I would suggest doing this only in batches of the same task type. Because if the other task details are different, you'll need to enter new information that will be applied to all of them. So if one was a payroll task and the other a bookkeeping task, the information you would enter would be applied to both. So the easiest way really to handle this reassignment in bulk would be to filter the list by something specific that will show you the same task type and then edit all of those in bulk. Additionally, I just want to confirm that you can change the assignee from any page you can view a task. That includes the Insights page in the task list by clicking on its name to open it, then also in the Accounts task list. And of course, when viewing linked tasks in any job without even needing to open the task. Okay, so now that all of that is clear, let's talk about automating all of this. Now pay attention now, since this can save you a ton of time. The following steps I'll be explaining here are all related to workflows. So if you're not familiar with using workflows, I would suggest either checking out our workflow-centered webinar or completing the workflow course on our TaxDome Academy. In either case, I'll try to keep this section simple since there's more things to talk about after this, and I really wouldn't want you to miss out on that. So let's clear up exactly what we'll cover here. We will talk about two specific automations: the Update Account Access automation and the Create Task automation. I've prepared some slides here for this in order to help you understand how to use them. The Update Account Access automation is used to add or remove assignees to a client account once their job reaches a specific stage in your pipeline. So let's use a tax preparation example for this. Initially, only you are assigned to a client, and it stays that way for the duration of the first stage, which is used to collect information and collect documents from your clients. Right after everything is done there, the job will move into the second stage, which in this case will be the tax preparation stage. So what I would do is add an Update Account Access automation that will assign my tax preparer to the client account. They didn't have access before, but now they will. At this point, the tax preparer does their work, and once everything is done, the client's job will once again move and trigger whatever automations are in the next stage. So what I'll do there is prepare another Update Account Access automation that will unassign my tax preparer and assign my reviewer. Now, the tax preparer can't access the account anymore, but they also don't need to because they're done with their work, right? So in this three-step example, the assignee automatically changed multiple times without me having to do any of that manually. Now that's pretty neat, isn't it? So what about the task assignments then? How does all of that work? Well, there are three ways to handle this, so I'll try to keep it simple here. I'll even reuse the previous example. In the second stage, when the tax preparer gets assigned, we can add a second automation to create a task. This will be a consistent step with all three methods since you'll always need the task automation. Now, the difference in your approach will depend on your process. If it's always that one team member that's going to be assigned, well, then you can just create a task template that has them set as the assignee, and every time the automation is triggered, they will get assigned. Now, option number 2. If you have multiple possible tax preparers, but they all do the same task for different clients, you can add it and then simply enable the assign to job assignee task. That way, it will match the assignee and you won't need to do the extra work. Now, on top of all of this, there's also an automation for updating the job assignee, which you can use to make things even easier for yourself. For the third option, we won't go into too much detail since we do cover this and how this all works in another webinar and another course. But to summarize this option briefly, you can have multiple task automations that have different assignees, and you can set up conditions to trigger the correct client groups. So, Preparer 1 takes care of client group 1. Preparer 2 takes care of client group number 2, and so on. Now let me quickly recap this section just to make sure that everybody here is on the same page. You can use the update account automation to change a client's assignees in every stage, and you can also use the task automations to make sure that the right team members are assigned to the newly created task. Next up, let's talk about team communication. The way this works in TaxDome is through our @mentions feature. You get to mention your team members in various places on TaxDome, and whenever you do, they're going to be notified about it. The current list of places you can mention your team members is in Account Notes, which are your go-to place to share any information with your team, ranging from some specific details and passwords to general preferences. Job Comments, which you'll commonly leave on a regular basis since these are the most akin to classic comment threads and are the best way to keep your team in the loop about a job. Task descriptions, which serve a similar function as the job comments, but are still available because tasks aren't always connected to jobs. And lastly, chats. As you're talking to your clients via TaxDome's secure messages, you can mention team members directly within those chats, and they'll be notified about them. Now, this is a great way to either pass the conversation along to somebody else or just to get somebody up to speed. Now, these are the current ways to get in touch with your team through TaxDome, and they cover all major bases for what you could need since you have separate places to communicate regarding clients, their jobs, and even a way to include others in your chats. Now, in the future, we will be expanding this even further with new functions like being able to leave notes on emails and more. So keep an eye out for those updates. So we know that you can control rights, assign your team and communicate with them, but how do you actually figure out how busy they are? Well, there's a couple of different options, but you can find the easiest one right as you log into your portal. On the Insights page, you have a section dedicated to showing you how many tasks and jobs your team members are working on currently, and they'll also be categorized into different columns depending on their types. The other way that you can keep track of this is by going to the Tasks tab in the Workflow page again, and then filtering the list to only show you the tasks that are currently assigned to a specific team member. This way, you get a very clear list view of everything that they're working on currently, and you still have other filtering options if you need to narrow it down even further. So let's say you're getting more bookkeeping clients, and you want to check which one of your bookkeepers should take care of the new clients that are coming in. Well, you just filter the list to first show you all tasks connected to your bookkeeping pipeline, and then pick one of your bookkeepers. You'll see everything they've got going on, and then you can adjust the filter to show you the other one in order for you to compare. That should help you avoid overloading any single individual. And additionally, you also have the Job Recurrences tab where you can check their upcoming jobs. Now, let's get into our final topic for this webinar before we start wrapping things up. We'll go over some common practices and also share some tips on how to handle team-related things inside of TaxDome. We can start by showing you how you can keep an eye on your team. If you go to your Team and Plans tab, where you can see your entire team and then click on their names, you will open up their profiles. Here, you can edit their information and even reset their passwords if necessary. But more importantly, you have this button up here that lets you log in as them in a read-only mode. So it's basically the same function that you can use for clients, but it's just for your team. This way, if there are ever some issues or confusion, you can always just take a look directly at what's going on and then log back out. Let me go back to the Team and Plans tab again. The other thing I want to talk about here is related to your subscriptions. If somebody from your team leaves and your subscription is still active, it can be used on someone else. You would deactivate that old team member and simply add the new one. When you do, TaxDome would give you the option to use that available license. Also, just a small tip while we are here. If you're working with long-time employees, but you put them on a monthly subscription, you might want to switch them to an annual one since it is effectively cheaper. You should likely just keep the seasonal help that you have on monthly subscriptions. The next thing we should talk about is the wiki. Here in this page, you can create internal documents that will be available to your entire team. Now you can use this for anything ranging from basic tutorials for your team members to full SOPs. Now having all the information they could potentially need in one place is going to be invaluable when it comes to saving you time by not having to re-explain things to employees over and over. You'll also be able to link these wiki pages to jobs, so your team won't even have to go looking for them, disregarding the fact that it wasn't hard to begin with. Anyhow, let's see. Next up, I want to point out something regarding pipelines. Even if you gave your team the Manage Pipelines access right, it doesn't mean that they can see all of the pipelines. You need to add them to the Available To field in each pipeline that you want them to be able to interact with. And finally, this is just a reminder, but do remember that you can change your team's access rights and roles at any time. So if somebody from your team were to tell you that they can't do something, they might not have the appropriate rights. So in those cases, you can simply check those rights and enable them if they're not turned on. All right, everybody, well, let's get into the recap. So what did we learn today? Well, we went over the basics by talking about adding team members and how the access rights and roles work. Right after, we spent time focusing on the assignment processes and what the difference between assigning and following is all about. We then switched gears a little bit to talk about tasks and how to automate both client and task assignments. We then closed it out by showing you how you can communicate with your team, how to keep track of their workloads, and in the end, we went over some common practices. So this sounds to me like we just had a very focused webinar. Everything was directly tied to how you'll manage your team, and I hope you can see the value in the functions that we shared with you today. So what's next for you? Well, at this point, you should be familiar with most of TaxDome, ranging from the initial steps to setting up workflows, and now even how to work with your team. There's always more work that's left, but for now, you should get your team members in, make sure that they're assigned correctly, and then you can start thinking about the next steps, which will involve the remaining parts of your setup. Now, of course, you can also visit our TaxDome Academy. Strongly recommend that you do, where you will find interactive courses that cover everything that you're going to need and much more. However, for today, well, that's going to be about it. I'd like to thank you all for joining me here and taking the time to sit through this webinar, and I certainly hope that it helped you learn a lot more about how to efficiently utilize TaxDome. I'll certainly be looking forward to having you all join me on future webinars that we're going to have. Have a great weekend, great week ahead. Thanks, everybody.